This is episode 120 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Welcome to episode 120 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today I have Aaron, Bae and Ariana Yoo on the show, and they are here to talk about Airbnb arbitrage. Both Aaron and Ariana are very aggressive real estate investors and arbitragers. And what that means is they're going in and they're renting properties from landowners, landlords, and they are re-renting them on Airbnb, anywhere from by the room to by the entire house or by the unit if they're doing multiplexes. And they are making incredible profits. One of the houses we discussed, they were making over $3,000 a month prior to the initial lockdown. And even during the lockdown, they were able to still generate positive cash flow. And now they're scaling up. They're at approximately 30 properties being done this way, plus their real estate holdings. And they're looking at new options. This has completely taken over and replaced their incomes. They went from university dropouts to working at coffee shops and serving to being highly successful real estate investors. And it's a really inspiring story. I had tons of questions for them, and I'm going to have tons of questions for them as I experiment with Airbnb myself down the road. Before we get into it, if you could kindly make sure that you hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell if you have not already done so, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. If you are an audio listener, I would greatly appreciate it if you would take a moment and rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts so that more people can find it. If you're new to this podcast and some of the terminology is not quite resonating with you just yet, head right back to episode 1 and take in the first 10 episodes. I'm confident that you'll have a much better footing after that. So without further ado, please enjoy episode 120 with Ariana Yoo and Aaron Bae. Hello and welcome to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I have Aaron Bae and Ariana Yoo on the show, and I think I said that all correctly. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks to you both. And I was just wondering if you could just start things off by telling us all a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. It's exciting to be on your podcast.
Real estate investors. I'm turning 29 this year.
I'm turning 28 this year.
And we started actually doing Airbnb arbitrage 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we actually started real estate investing, buying properties in 2020. And that was when we bought our first property.
Mm-hmm. So you just started buying?
We just started buying, yeah.
Okay. I see some big numbers on your Instagram wall. It looks like you've got a lot of properties. Do you own all those, or?
It's a mixture of owned and arbitrage units. So it's not all personally owned.
Okay. There's a few people out there doing this arbitrage thing. Where did you learn that from?
Well, originally our initial goal was to do something called rent hacking, trying to get our living costs down. Mm-hmm. And out of necessity, because we wanted to reduce our living expenses, we started looking for opportunities to share a home with other people. And interestingly enough, we decided to rent an entire house in the North York area. Mm-hmm. At the time, the rent was $5,800 a month. It was a giant, like 4,000, 5,000 square foot home.
It's over 5,000 square feet, actually.
Is it actually?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's a big house.
Really big, yeah.
Yeah. And we saw potential to have 10 rooms in there. So we started doing room rentals. And if anybody knows at the time in Toronto, room rentals in North York went for like $1,000 to like $1,500 per month. Mm-hmm. So we saw a real opportunity to capitalize on that spread.
Is that where you're living now? Or
no,
you don't live there anymore?
No, we don't, unfortunately. Well, we were living somewhere else at the time when we were looking to do rent hacking. And then when we fell upon this property, it was a 7-bedroom house that we ended up adding 3 more bedrooms, making it into a 10-bedroom house. And once we set everything up and we got all the tenants inside, we decided like maybe living with that many people was a bit too much for us. And at the time it was already fully occupied. So we decided to go a different route for our own. We are still rent hacking. So we're still doing the same thing that we had initially planned. We're just doing it on a smaller scale with
less bedrooms.
Yeah, with less bedrooms.
Yeah, I mean, one of the follow-up questions I was going to have is, well, first off, what do you mean you added bedrooms to a rental property? You were renting this property out and adding bedrooms?
Yeah. So basically we spoke with the landlord and said, hey, listen, like would you mind if we turned the library and the family room into extra bedrooms? And he said, well, sure, why not? As long as you're paying the rent and as long as you're taking care of the property, he was okay with it. So in collaboration with the landlord, we went ahead and created 2 more bedrooms out of the main floor. And then we added another room in the basement because that was currently used as a storage space. But we saw that, it had a door. So technically it could be a bedroom.
But we did everything in a way where it was, if the landlord later wanted to sell the house or something and we had to take down those walls, it would be something that we'd be able to do without causing any damage to his actual home. And we talked to the contractors and everything about that as well. So it was an easy project, no damage or anything that's going to be left to the house. So he was agreeable to it.
Literally just drywall and a door.
Yeah.
So you put up some drywall and a door.
Yeah.
So what did you have into creating these 3 extra bedrooms?
I'm sorry?
How much money did you have into creating these 3 extra bedrooms?
That cost us around $4,000. Yeah. Kind of high when you in hindsight, but then we didn't really know too much. So.
Right. Okay. And then what did you have into like furnishings and all that stuff? Or was that already in there?
No, we actually it was a completely vacant house. And it's been vacant for some time. And when we furnished it, initially we did it as a complete room rental thing. So we were thinking that all the rooms are going to be rented out to students. So we did have, some of the bedrooms, some of the larger bedrooms had 2 beds in them, 2 desks, that sort of thing for double occupancy. And then, so that cost us around, and we went really cheap with all the furniture.
Okay.
So I think that cost us around $6,000 to furnish the entire house. Keep in mind,
that's cheap.
Yeah, it is very cheap. But I did have furniture that my family had left over, like couches and dining tables and those big kind of pieces the had already kind of transferred from the family home that was left over into this property. So the only thing that we actually had to buy was the things for the bedroom. So beds, mattresses, desks.
Providing pots and pans and cutlery and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. So you were all in for about $10,000 between the reno and the furnishings and miscellaneous, or was it a bit more than that?
At the time, but then we decided to pivot because we had 2 big bedrooms that were just not renting out to students. So basically, we were trying to average about $1,000 per room. Those 2 big bedrooms were like master bedrooms with massive walk-in closets and like a giant washroom.
Like jacuzzi tubs, like super luxury.
So we were hoping to get like at least like $1,300 for those rooms. But they were just not renting because we had, I guess,
there just wasn't the demand for it. I mean, like students are not looking for,
right? Like you're not looking to pay like $1,300 for a room.
And that's what you wanted for it? You wanted to get $1,300 for that room? Okay.
Yeah. That's what we wanted for it. So we ended up pivoting onto Airbnb. So we put those 2 rooms on Airbnb, hoping to get at least $1,300. But it ended up doing way better than we had anticipated. So it started doing like $2,500 per room in
per month.
It's month. Crazy. And then that's kind of like why we decided that, oh wow, we see a lot of potential in Airbnb and this is pretty crazy. Like the numbers we're getting are completely insane. So that's kind of like how we entered into Airbnb. But we just returned all the furniture for those 2 bedrooms, and then we spruced them all up into like Airbnb standard, and that cost us about $1,000 per room.
Okay.
To make it like really nice, and then but it was totally worth it.
So you were another $2,000 of investment to make those rooms really nice. Okay. So you're all in for about $12,000. And then did you kick all the students out and just go straight to Airbnb for everything? Or do you still have students in the other rooms and you just have the 2 on Airbnb?
Yeah. So we still have our tenant profile basically is students and young professionals. So it's not all students. We ended up gearing more towards young professionals because it was just,
they could afford it better.
Yeah, they could afford it better. And, they're more clean and everything like that. So right now we have young professionals and students that live there, and we also do Airbnb at the same time.
You have 10 people living in one house together, sharing a kitchen.
Yes.
Yeah.
How does that work?
In the beginning, like it wasn't too bad. It's just right now with coronavirus, we are running into some issues with people having, understandable health concerns, right? So we've been getting a lot of people who wanted to book those rooms for the purpose of quarantine. And, us trying to be responsible landlords per se, we had to turn a lot of that away. So we have had some vacancies, but it hasn't been to the point where we're bleeding cash flow every single month. So we're still staying afloat, but we're not as profitable as we were before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's get into some of these numbers, and I'll pick your brain on this more. So you're 12,000 in. What's your rent payment there? What are you paying for the place?
5,800 per month.
And does that include utilities?
No.
Okay.
And then we allocate another like 1,200 for utilities and biweekly cleanings.
Okay. Okay. So the 1,200 covers the biweekly cleanings and the utilities.
Yeah. And internet.
Okay.
So all of our expenses, really, other expenses.
All right. Yeah. No other expenses outside of that, really?
No,
okay.
Not really. I mean, yeah. And if we do ever have anything, like let's say, for example, we had one guest who splattered spaghetti sauce all over the kitchen ceiling. And that's, again, something because with Airbnb, you're able to have them reimburse it. And then for our room rentals, we actually write in the lease that if they were to cause any damage or anything that would have us go out of pocket, then they would have to reimburse us for that. So.
Gotcha. All right. And what have you been averaging? Well, first off, when did you start doing this house?
This was in the beginning of 2019, I believe.
January 2019 was when we acquired it.
And were you averaging like $12,000 a month on the place in revenue?
Yes. Not at first. We had anticipated about 3,000 net cash flow per month. But with Airbnb being so successful as it was, we were making like at least over $5,000 per month.
Okay. So yeah, if you were getting 12, I'm calculating $7,000 in expenses. So if you're getting 12, that would make for 5,000. So you got to that. So you were at $5,000 cash flows, which on your $12,000 investment means you're paying off in a little more than 2 months. Yeah. So that's pretty 600% return or something like that. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Obviously, the situation in Canada has changed since March 2020. What do you look like since then?
It really varies depending on vacancy and the occupancy rates for Airbnb. But for the ones in Toronto, we've been averaging around 2,500 to 3,000 a month in cash flow.
Okay, so this one you've been averaging 2,500. So it's just dropped a bit because of your vacancies.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're more like 9,500 on average a month in revenue.
Around there, yeah.
Okay, it's still good. I mean, it's still a property you don't own, and you're making money on. Now, how does the insurance situation work there?
So we do have insurance on that. Now the landlord didn't require anything special, so like we kind of lucked out there. But there are other insurance companies that will do Airbnb insurance, like Square One, and I know there are a few others. But yeah, it really depends on what the landlord's comfortable with.
Okay, so yeah, in this case, I'm more just talking for your comfort. Like, I guess Airbnb obviously covers you on those rooms, but what about the other ones? You know, do you have other types of insurance that you use typically to feel comfortable as a landlord, or as a rent hacker, or Airbnb arbitrager?
I don't think we have anything in particular, at least for the rent hacking portion that we do in Toronto. We just have the basic tenant insurance. For our tenant insurance, we do go a little higher than we normally would, just because there's a lot of people and there's a lot of personal belongings. So
you take out a tenant insurance package, you as the renter. Okay, and do you disclose to your insurance company that you are re-renting the rooms?
Not quite. So we understood that this wasn't really like a repeatable process, and it wasn't something that we could replicate over time. So that was like the only one that we did, and we just stopped doing like the room rental stuff. And now we kind of go a little bit cleaner, and we try to do more like actual units itself.
So just renting out full units on Airbnb.
I mean, that was just something that we did to get our feet wet. We didn't have too much capital to start in the beginning, and we were still working full time at the time. So it was an opportunity that we saw and that we wanted to take, and we're glad we took it. I mean, it's still a great experience to be running something like this, but it taught us a lot and was able to lead us into the direction we are now.
Oh yeah, I love what you guys have done. I mean, sometimes you just got to take action, and you're making money, you're creating an arbitrage situation, which is brilliant. You know, rather than hard work, it's smart work. I think that's more people need to learn from that. So it's really awesome what you're doing. How many more of this type of thing have you done? I understand not with rooms, but you've done it with units. How many more have you done since then?
We've done a few duplexes, triplexes. We've done a few units in an eightplex that an investor friend of ours wanted to offload.
We've done a number of arbitrage deals since this one. I mean, we were doing this arbitrage. We were doing the initial one first, so the one that we were just talking about, and then we started buying property shortly after that. And then after we decided, okay, well, we can't keep buying properties because it's harder to scale quickly with a model like that. So then that's when we decided, okay, let's go back and grow our arbitrage business. And then it kind of just skyrocketed from there. We actually had initially we're
approaching about 30 units of Airbnb arbitrage. They're not all live yet, but we have it kind of lined up. So we will have them up and ready by, I think, June or July.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot. So 30 of Airbnb arbitrage. What do you have in your personal holdings, like stuff that you've bought?
I have a few duplexes, a couple triplexes. My biggest acquisition was a 22-unit building that I bought with some partners as well. And we're just closing on an 8-unit motel this Friday.
Oh, wow. And are you trying to do everything Airbnb angle? Like, do you do some long-term leases as well?
We have a lot of long-term tenants. We are transitioning. Well, most of the long-term tenants are inherited. So we really had no kind of option there.
Like in the 22-unit building, for example.
But we are trying to pivot more towards Airbnb just because we understand that in Ontario, especially, the landlord-tenant laws are not in the landlord's favor.
Especially now.
Especially.
Oh, yeah. Can't evict them either. Yeah.
No, you can't. Good luck.
How is that for logic? It's a good way to make sure no landlords introduce new rental units to the market. You can't kick them out. They don't have to pay.
And rent control.
Yeah.
What was that? Sorry?
And rent control.
And rent control, yeah. Unless you've built it after 2018, right? I think November 2018, whatever the date was. Yeah, so it's tricky in Ontario right now, and I don't blame you for wanting to go that route. Now, with that being said, obviously things are different. Knowing the continual, perpetual lockdown situation and the no obvious signs of this ever turning around, what are your thoughts going forward? Do you see the demand staying consistent for Airbnb? I know there was a little bit of a time back, last year where they actually outlawed the use of Airbnb. What do you see happening?
Back then, when they outlawed Airbnb, it was actually just for short-term rentals. So, for example, if someone was staying for a vacation, so over a weekend or something like that, that was something that we weren't able to do. So, for us, for example, we had to pivot to doing more long-term stays. So, weekly, more than 2 weeks. We did monthly stays, and we kind of pivoted our strategy that way.
And that's usually how the booking behavior changes too, right? Because a lot of people nowadays, they don't really book for leisure travel. It's more for necessity, especially with lockdowns and the stay-at-home order. It's like people won't book for 2 or 3 nights at a time. Instead, they'll start booking for 2 weeks or a month, right? So we find that as long as you can kind of pivot your pricing strategies to accommodate those kind of guests, you will have a lot of people booking for those purposes.
Yeah, ever since, and it's funny enough that once COVID hit, we actually ended up doing a lot better, and we were able to grow our business even further once everything with lockdown and everything was going on. And what we noticed was when a lockdown initially started, we were getting people who were stuck in Canada and needed a place to stay. So, they may have been staying at a hotel or a short-term accommodation previously, and then realized that, okay, we can't go back home. So we're kind of stuck here, and we needed to find a place to stay until we can go back home. So that was the kind of guest that we were hosting in the beginning.
So has your vacancy rate gone down from 2019? Are you lower vacancy now?
Yes,
we are.
Wow. That's very interesting, but longer stays on average.
Longer stays, yes.
Right.
Okay. So what's your average stay now? Like a month or a couple of weeks?
2 weeks.
It really depends. I would say it varies from like weekly stays to like monthly stays. We have people who have booked our place until like the end of July, so like 3-4 months stay. So it really depends, but we have been seeing a lot more people trying to travel for a longer period of time.
Okay, so just people that are, especially when they're factoring in the 2-week quarantine, they're probably not going to come for a short visit to Canada if they are coming to Canada. Although I don't know how many people are visiting Canada right now.
We've been hosting tons of quarantine as well.
Yeah.
So
just pay for their quarantine, just so that they don't have to go home if they're coming back to Canada, I guess.
Yeah.
And what are you typically charging for something like that? Like, first off, is this all Toronto, or are you outside of the city as well?
So we do in Toronto, but we're kind of phasing out of Toronto now. Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, London, Windsor, and now Bayfield, Ontario.
Bayfield. Wow. Okay. You're spreading yourself around.
That's where the motel is. So.
That's where the motel. Okay. The one you bought. Okay. And you see these numbers working in all these cities?
Across the board, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So across the 7 cities that we're in, we're averaging around 93% occupancy.
93%. So just listed on regular Airbnb.
Yeah. And I would say for us, I mean, like Toronto is probably the biggest hit because we don't actually have just self-contained units in Toronto because based on their regulations, and they're just way too strict with their regulations, we decided for our Airbnbs in Toronto, they're just by rooms in order for us to kind of get through those regulations, right?
Because it doesn't send off the alarm bells like you're over renting your place under their rules.
Yeah, that as well. And because in Toronto, you can't have your place on Airbnb or do short-term rentals for 6 months out of the year.
More than 6 months,
Yeah, that's really restricted. But if you do it by room, for example, 3 rooms in a home, then you're able to do that all year round and they optimize you for it. So the biggest hit for us was in Toronto because obviously when you're doing a shared house, you can't be hosting quarantine stays. But other than that, I mean, in all of our other cities, we've been doing great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to hear. How the heck do you manage all those different cities? You've got cleaning crews, you've got people to help you out. Are you driving around all the time? Like, what's happening? What's your daily life like?
So in the beginning, when we had just those 2 room rentals on Airbnb, we were doing everything ourselves. So furnishing, cleaning, guest turnover, everything was done by us. And then we realized that, this is not a way to scale, right? So we started to kind of break down all the steps and processes that it takes to, number one, set up an Airbnb, have the guest turnover, all the cleanings, all the restocking, all the operational stuff. We broke it down to steps and processes into a system that anybody can kind of replicate. So once we figured that out, it was just kind of plug and play, finding the right people to manage housekeeping, the cleaning, the furnishing, all that stuff, right?
And so that's always the toughest part, is just finding the right people to join your team. And sometimes it's kind of trial and error always, when it comes to hiring people. But for us, I mean, it's been quite the journey, and we've found a lot of success in hiring people, and a lot of people are interested in being part of an Airbnb and seeing the process and everything. So it's been interesting for sure.
Okay. Yeah. It sounds like it's interesting. So no longer needing to drive everywhere. So you don't drive to London when something happens.
No, never.
You have somebody on the ground there that's responsible for everything?
Yeah, we have on-site managers for every city. So in case anything happens that, requires us to be there, we have someone else go out for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and even with all the setup as well, like we just send them, like I still do all the design. So I'll order everything and then, give them a floor plan of how I want everything to look. And then it's pretty much up to them to make it happen.
Do you get like somebody to go in and do a black lines floor plan and send it to you so that you can spec out where you want things?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've got
unless
somebody
the landlord already has one.
Okay. Yeah. So you got to go like Matterport or get somebody to go in and do that virtual tour thing. Okay. That's smart. I love systems, man. I'm going to keep asking you questions.
That's the only way
you got to work
scale.
on your business, not in your business, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I do everything at a distance. So,
well, that's why you're in Florida.
Yeah. I've been in Florida for almost 3 months and my construction company's still going back home. So, yeah, it works. But yeah. So in London, how many houses do you have there?
3 units, right? So far.
3.
And we just got in there. So
yeah, we just got in there about last month.
Okay.
In March.
So, yeah.
In March, yeah.
And when you went in there, did you start with like a man or woman that was willing to kind of run the show for you down there? Is that where it started?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we as soon as we were like, hey, we're going to be setting up units in London, we decided to reach out to some people who are interested in being kind of like our assistant, our boots on the ground kind of guy. And then they kind of oversaw the entire process of furnishing.
And how do you structure that relationship? Do they get a piece of the profit? Do they just get an hourly rate? Like what's that look like?
Hourly rate.
Yeah.
Just an hourly rate. Okay. And how easy is it to find something like that? Are these like investor minded people that are following you, or are these just, Indeed hires?
Some of them.
Yeah, most of the time it is like investor minded people or like younger people who kind of want to get their feet wet in the real estate space and are just willing to kind of like hustle, right? So
yeah, they'll reach out through Instagram or something, or he'll post something saying, we're looking for a boots on the ground kind of person in London, and then someone will message him, and we'll kind of choose from there. Other than that, we usually just post something on Kijiji outlining the scope of work and what the job really pertains, and then we'll have people contact us and we'll go from there.
That's very intriguing. I find hiring to be quite the challenge, but I mean, maybe I'm overcomplicating it. Like it sounds like it's working out really well. So how would you know if something wasn't working out with these people you hire? You say, hey, I want this, we've leased this house. I want you to go set it up. Here's what I want you to do. How would you know if they're not working out?
So number one, we always set up cameras first in each unit. Well, not in each unit, but like outside the units. So we always know, if the work is being done. But typically, like the people we hire, we hire them based on their character more than like anything else. So as long as we can see that they're really hungry to learn and that they're willing to work hard, it's usually a good fit. We haven't had too many issues with our boots on the ground people, but we did have one guy who we had to fire, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah, and it's not always smooth sailing. You're always going to. It's these kind of things that. It's like a lesson for you as well, and how sometimes you have to be a little bit more aware of what's going on, especially when you're entering a new city and you're just hiring somebody new. You can't just give them all the trust at once. So that was a huge lesson for us, and then we pivoted since then. But yeah, for sure, you need to get the cameras up there first. You need to judge their character and have them send progress photos every single day.
Who sets up your cameras? Do you have somebody do that as well, or you already had somebody that was kind of helping you?
We have them do it.
Okay. So yeah, set up the camera, get the internet set up, like go wait there until the 4-hour window where Belle's going to show up and hook up the internet for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually nothing starts until we get the cameras up so that we know
cameras
what's going on.
and the door locks.
Yeah.
Locks.
And what do you pay somebody like that? Like $20 an hour?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got your help on the ground. They'll do all that stuff, get the door locks on. How do you find real landlords that are on board with this?
So in the beginning, it was a real struggle, kind of like we're just cold calling people on Kijiji saying, hey, like you're interested in renting out your place for the purpose of me doing Airbnb. And it wasn't a very good approach. So we kind of pivoted since then, obviously.
A lot of rejection.
And we had to go through like 100 calls to get like one yes. But now it's like we reach out to investors who are more like numbers focused, and we focus on like providing as much value that we can to them as an investor. So, what are the common pain points that a landlord has when they're investing in real estate? Number one, vacancy, tenant problems, maintenance, repairs, property management. Like these are all things that every investor kind of faces, and you can always put a number, like an expense figure to those problems, right? So if you, as an Airbnb arbitrage expert, say that, hey, listen, by renting to me, I will figure out your vacancy, right? Like you're not going to have any vacancy in your units. You won't have to pay a property manager 10% because I'll be managing it myself. The repairs and maintenance, it'll be quite minimal because typically people allocate like 5-10%, but that's with a long-term tenant. So if a long-term tenant were to punch a hole in the wall, then that's typically a cost that the landlord eats, right? Like you're not going to have much recourse to go after the long-term tenant. Whereas if it's like a short-term tenant, short-term guest who's staying in that unit and they punch a hole in the wall, you can always charge them back for it or get the money back from Airbnb. So that's something that we can provide as Airbnb hosts that, traditional tenants cannot offer. So by putting a dollar figure on paper and saying, hey, listen, by renting to us, we'll help you save X amount, on an annualized basis on your operating costs, then it just becomes more of kind of like a numbers game for them. And if they see that the value that we're providing matches with what they want, then it's a no-brainer.
Let's go through the numbers a little bit on what that would look like. Like are you going after like a bungalow in London? I'll use London as an example because I'm familiar with what the rental rates there are right now. So is it like a 3-bed, 2-bath type of bungalow that you would rent, or would you go for something bigger, smaller? Like, what are you after?
We like doing duplexes at the very minimum.
Yeah, at the very minimum.
So an up-down duplex?
Yeah. Or side by side, or just something with more units it's easier for us, more scalable, and we can implement our systems right away. And without we're only doing one property, would you be willing to work for us? It's a lot easier when you start off with 3 or 4 or 5 units. It's right off the bat.
And would you be looking for something that's newly renovated, or something that's just average quality? Like what are you looking for?
Always newly renovated.
Yeah, generally newly renovated. I mean, we have done properties that are not, as nice as some other ones are, which is fine. But generally, we like to go a little bit more high end. It's you just have better.
Best experience.
Like you're not coming in and painting the place so that it looks the way you want it. You want it to already look good, and then you just kind of accent it.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you were getting a duplex, like an up down, the upper unit, I don't know what that would get in London right now, maybe like 1,700, something like that. And then the lower might get 1,400 or maybe 1,800 on the top. I don't know. So you might be somewhere in the ballpark of 3,000 or 3,200 a month on a monthly rental as a landlord. So what would your pitch to me be if you wanted me to rent one of my duplexes to you?
All right. So right off the bat, you're not going to have vacancy. So as long as you're renting to me, like I'll pay you your rents, no drama, no BS. I'm not going to say like, hey, because of COVID, I can't pay your rent, right?
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, property management. So you would have to pay a property manager typically around 10%. I know a lot of people kind of underestimate the property management costs, but the real property management expenses that come with offloading that actually ends up being higher than 10%, but we'll just use 10% as like a baseline. So
gotcha.
I'll save you $320 per month on your property management expenses. Let's see, what else? Repairs and maintenance, 5%. Any damage that my guest causing your unit, I will cover, but I cannot pay for general wear and tear, right? So let's just say 5% right there.
Yeah.
Right. That's an additional $160 per month that I'm saving. What else?
You'll get a professionally staged house, and we'll provide you with the photos. So if you ever want to sell your property in the near future, you'll have that. And if you ever want to, start doing viewings and things like that, that your property is going to look to the nines.
Totally good. Yeah.
The property will be cleaned multiple times a month. And because your home is our business, that we're going to be taking really good care of it. And if you know anything about our reputation or anything that we post on Instagram, then
So you'll want to take it. Yeah, that's the obvious. I mean, I think, just really simply, we're going to treat your house better than a tenant would. Like your house will be treated better than a normal tenant would.
Yeah.
That's probably a good place to start. So as far as rental rate goes, are you just paying market rent?
We try to negotiate market rents, but we try to get at least 1 month free. And
1 month free.
That just sets up us like enough time to get all the furnishings and everything in place.
Okay. So let's say you're into 3,200 a month then for an up down duplex. Is that somewhere ballpark that you would be into, or not quite that much?
Yeah, that's around there.
Okay. So you're paying 3,200 a month. What can you turn that into?
So in London, we just got in there, so I can't really give like accurate numbers, but on average per unit, I think we do about 3,000 per month on Airbnb. So that spread is where we make our. Okay.
So even with a basement, you're still averaging 3,000 a month.
Well, with a basement, it really depends.
Depends on how many bedrooms the unit has too, right? So if it's a 3-bedroom unit, generally we make about $3,000 per unit. If it's a 2-bedroom unit,
it'd be like 2,500.
25, 28.
25, okay.
So it really depends on how many bedrooms there are and how many people you can accommodate there.
Okay. So if you had a 3 up and then you had the 2 bedrooms down in a separate unit, then you're more like just under 6,000?
Yeah, maybe like
5,800. Okay, 5,500
on average. Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of you have your buying list, I'm sure, where you buy your furniture from to furnish. So if it's a 3-bedroom up, 2-bedroom down, what's your bill to furnish that?
So generally for furnishing, we're looking at about $5,000 per unit.
Where do you buy it to get for 5,000? Like 2 couches, like coffee tables, TVs?
We use a lot of like Amazon, Wayfair, IKEA.
Okay.
Those are pretty much the 3 trios that we usually order from. And
you can get a good couch from Wayfair. I don't know. IKEA, I guess. Yeah. I feel like the IKEA ones are really uncomfortable.
IKEA because they're too expensive. But for couches, I usually always go for Wayfair or Amazon, and they always usually cost me less than $500.
Really? Okay. See, I've never looked for a couch on Amazon, but I'm going to now.
He also calls them and says like, hey, like, I've been furnishing a lot of places with you guys. Like, can you offer me a better rate? And typically they'll give you a better rate.
Yeah.
Right?
So especially with Wayfair, if you have a business account with them or Wayfair professional account, once you put everything in your cart, you could call them and ask for the best quote that they can give you. And usually they'll give you a nice discount on top of whatever's offered already. So.
Yeah, you guys are just full of the gold nuggets today. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because I mean, even for my student stuff, just replacing furnishing, because it gets worn out. Eventually, you got to replace it. And I originally used Jysk, or however you pronounce that, JYSK, and their quality was just bad. Tried IKEA's stuff. I just went into the store and sat on it. It didn't feel nice. Mm-hmm. So I long and short, I've ended up spending too much on like nicer couches that even they, break down and have to be replaced too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice to just get them cheap and then you can just replace them as you need.
Yeah. And, with IKEA, you get the standard, everyone knows what IKEA couches look like and stuff. But when you go on Wayfair or Amazon, you can find more unique pieces with nice colors that really play well in your photographs. And people really like that. So, and we also always go for couches that usually are able to transform into a bed as well, so that you can accommodate more people and add another sleeping area.
So if you're in a 3-bed unit, you're trying to sleep 8, are you?
3-bed unit, usually 7 or 8. 7 or 8.
Because some of these bungalows, the bedroom's too small for a queen. Like it'd be hard to sleep 2 in some of the smaller bedrooms, right? Unless you do a bunk bed.
Yeah.
Do you do that ever?
We never do bunk beds.
No bunk beds. Too dangerous.
We never do bunk beds. And the reason for that is because you just attract a certain type of clientele with bunk beds.
Well, for cottages, you could do bunk beds, but I think for like things in the city, it's just better not to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see a reason not to. Just circling back, like who would be the primary clientele that would be coming into a product like this, like one of these duplexes right now?
All shapes and sizes. Like we have people like, for example, nurses who are there for work, who are contractors. We have people visiting family, people who are in between houses, needing to stay for like a week or even like a month. We've had people who had like the basement flooded, and in between rentals, they just need a place to stay.
Okay. So could be a little of anything. And you're still averaging the 2-week stay, even in London so far?
Me too. So we price it so that we're not getting, those people who are there to party. I mean, not saying that we haven't had those issues before, but generally that's the kind of people that we go for.
Okay. And how long do you foresee, like if you're investing the 5,000, I'm guessing there maybe be $1,000 more for pots and pans and miscellaneous others, or does 5,000 really encapsulate it?
$5,000 really encapsulates all the like beds, mattresses, couches, pots, pans, forks, all of that.
And any other operational costs, like you have ongoing cleaning and then you'll have miscellaneous maintenance. So what are your operating costs?
So for cleaning costs, we charge a premium to our guests. So if our cleaning costs us $100, we'll charge our guests back, like let's say $150, and that would also encompass the cost of consumables for us as well. Okay. So like toilet paper, paper towels, and stuff.
Weekly garbage removal.
Garbage removal.
So having that sort of what do you call it?
That margin.
Yeah, that extra margin really helps us with covering all the other little expenses. Like if there's a little repair that we have to do every now and then, or like we said, the weekly garbage removals.
But even the repairs, like we can usually charge that back to the guest.
So like your boots on the ground, that person, are they usually pretty handy? Like whoever you're hiring, like will they fix the stuff themselves?
Yeah. Yes,
so you ask, should be somewhat handy, can make small repairs around the house.
Yeah, that's a requirement with the job.
Okay, yeah, that's good idea. Okay, so really you have no other operating expenses that aren't covered in that cleaning fee, which is just in addition to what you charge.
Yeah, not much. I mean, just internet.
Internet, utilities, if they're not included in
like
the rent.
Lawn and snow care.
Yeah, lawn and snow care.
So lawn and snow, you're going to be like $1,200 a year, worst case, I think.
Around there.
And then you're going to have internet, which is going to be probably another $1,200 a year.
Yep, on average.
And then utilities. If your standard duplex, are you guys paying the utilities?
It depends. Depends on what we can negotiate. A lot of times we can get it all inclusive. Sometimes it'll just be like plus hydro. We don't like to have too many bills just because it complicates the process. So we would rather negotiate like an all-inclusive rent rather than trying to do like plus utilities.
Well, too many bills is a major problem if you're manually going in and paying them.
Exactly.
But I just set all of that, like London Hydro and gas. It's just automatic withdrawal, so I don't even look at them, which could be good, could be bad. I mean, I'm not going to change it though. If they think I owe it, I mean, how am I going to get out of that anyway? So I've argued with them about water before. They didn't care. One year I had 400 cubic meters of water used in 1 month, just randomly in the middle of the summer. I'm pretty sure somebody filled up a pool using my house's water. I'm like, your water meter's broken. They're like, no, it's not. Okay.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, it happens. So anyway, let's just assume that you did pay utilities on this example. So say that's $4,000 a year. So then your monthly operating expenses would be, your annual would be about 6,400 divided by 12. So you'd be about 530 a month. So you're collecting 5,500 less the 3,200 rent, less the 530. So you're getting about 1,760 profit on one unit or one house. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. On
an average. Okay, so that's really good, because how many of those do you really need before you're saying, okay, well, we don't need to work, like we can just do this?
Yeah.
Do you think this works relatively like anywhere, like most places?
Everywhere that we've done.
So. Everywhere we've done, it typically works out. Like I really like Airbnbs in the cities, just because I feel like the demand is relatively stable. Like cottages and vacation rentals, like it may fluctuate depending on the season, lockdowns and whatever like reasons that the government may give us, right? But for the units in the city, I find that it's very stable, and we can kind of break it down to like almost like a science, right? So it's just a numbers game for us at the end.
Yeah, there's always demand for it in the city. I mean, people are always looking for furnished accommodations around the city, so it's been nice for us.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's super interesting to me. Like the first time I heard this concept, I really liked it. But then when the whole lockdown thing happened, it really made me rethink Airbnb. Obviously, some things have changed. I know cottage country has gone crazy for Airbnb because less people are traveling outside the country. They're just going stir crazy. So they want to go to the cottage, which is really good for people who have, stuff near beaches and stuff like that. You had a couple of things that I was going to go over here. So, what's the secret with your Airbnb growth? How are you making this continue?
I think we pretty much touched upon that. Just really trying to add as much value as possible to landlords, and just being creative with how you pitch your strategy, right? Because especially because we're working with a lot of investors, real estate investors who are focused on growing their portfolio. They don't want to be focused and stressing about each and every single property they purchase. They just want it to be more of a hands-off experience. And that's what we offer, kind of like hassle-free landlording, right?
So to new landlords, I can see a ton of value to that. Because it took me a long time to learn how to manage my properties efficiently and in a cost-effective way. If somebody's new and they're busy and they work, I think you guys would probably be a pretty good solution to a lot of people. What you're proposing here. hands off is nice.
Yeah. And even with investors who have been investing for quite some time and they see what we're doing, we've had them reach out to us and ask if we're interested in taking over some of their units, because they're sick and tired of dealing with tenants and nobody wants to deal with those kind of things anymore. So if they see the value that we can offer, and because they know that we're looking to scale as well, we can scale with them. And the more units that they acquire, the more units that we can also rent from them, and it kind of becomes a more systemized process for them as well.
They don't have to worry about like tenant placement costs, commissions.
It's like a long-term, it can become like a long-term relationship where we both kind of grow together, and so we both provide value to each other, and it's great.
Do you tell them to get proper insurance that calls out Airbnb and says it's okay, usually, so that they don't have any issues? Usually,
well, for them, I mean, the property is still technically rented to a long-term tenant, so they don't really concern themselves with it too much. And
it's really up to them.
Yeah, and then for Airbnb, I mean, it's more of our responsibility of getting the right insurance, and Airbnb also does provide a pretty nice insurance for hosts as well. So we haven't really run into much.
So no real issues.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super interesting. I know we're kind of circling back here, but what's your background? Like, what did you guys both do before you were doing this?
Oh.
So we are both university dropouts.
Yeah.
I was actually a barista right after dropping out of university. I used to make a lot of coffee. And then after making coffee for a couple of years, I became a server at a restaurant.
Yeah, we both became servers, and we were doing that for a few years. And while we were doing that, I think at the time we were doing like 2 or 3 jobs at the same time. And so we were doing all of that. And then we decided, we had funds that we had saved up because we were working all the time, 7 days a week, no weekends, no break, no Christmas, no holidays.
Like no opportunities to spend money, right? So.
Exactly. So once we saved up enough money, that's when we kind of started looking to the arbitrage route and found this house. And then, we were able to really
that just like supercharged our savings.
Yeah.
Do you ever lose on a property? Like you think it's going to be a winner, you sign the lease for a year, I'm guessing, and then realize it's not a winner and you're losing money on it. Does that ever happen to you?
Never.
Yeah, just never. So, knock on wood, but it hasn't happened to us so far.
I mean, if you sign a lease at market rents, worst case, you can drop down your monthly price to like $200 above the market rent. And then it'll always stay booked year round. So like worst case, like you'll take a small profit, but it'll get booked. Yeah.
Right. So you're just saying to just keep getting booked, but you will have those operating expenses.
And like, hey, worst case, you can always sublet to someone else. Right. So it's not that big of a deal.
So there's a lot of ways you can pivot. Is there anything that you would suggest to people to do market validation on their specific market? If they wanted to say, hey, does my city work for this? Can I do this in my city?
Number one, I would say look at the population. As long as you have a city with a decent population like Windsor, London, Kitchener, Waterloo, it's going to work. And if you're looking at specific locations in that city, I would try to look for clusters of hotels. So if you see a lot of big name hotels in like one spot, then that's usually a good indicator that those guys have done enough research to know that there's enough demand for short-term rentals to justify sinking in millions and millions of dollars setting up those hotels. So then you kind of piggyback off that research and say, hey, listen, if there's hotels here, I can set up an Airbnb and do reasonably well.
Yeah.
I think the very first thing before you even look at the population is to go in and do your due diligence to see what kind of regulations are in place for Airbnb and short-term rentals.
And just hop on Airbnb as a traveler, right? And try to look at, what other listings are there and how booked are they, right? Like what do the sleeper hosts offer? What do the photos look like? What kind of furnishing do they have, right?
What can you do differently that maybe, would attract people to you?
How much do you rely on like an AirDNA software?
Not so much, honestly.
I honestly have never used AirDNA until recently when I was just looking at like my motel.
Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to get a better idea of what short-term rentals were charging in that specific region because I've never done a vacation rental. So that was kind of like why I chose the AirDNA. But what I found with AirDNA is it's a very like generic kind of like a number crunching, I guess, software. So you can kind of get a rough idea as to like what you can charge and what you can generate, but it's not like the best I guess, tool to use to as an accurate representation of what you can actually make on Airbnb.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it can be off. That's for sure. I've looked at it, used it for some markets down here and tried to gauge, and you'll see an outlier property that's making so much money and then compare it to one that's not making much. And there's no real explanation for why is this one doing so much better than this one. And so, yeah, there's a lot of questions that it creates, I would say, when using it. Okay, definitely interesting talking to you guys. I don't want to take up all your time here, but if people wanted to reach out to you or follow your journey, where should we send them?
Our Instagram. Yeah,
your Instagram. I think you shared that link with me, so I can put it in the show notes so people can find you there. And are you posting pictures of your properties, the ones that you're renting out and things like that?
Ariana is. I'm more of like a mindset kind of guy, so
okay.
You're not going to see much Airbnb.
Well, we'll post a lot in our stories. Aaron posts a lot of stuff on his stories, and we do some posts of like our properties and how they're staged, and some breaking down some of the numbers and things like that. So definitely interested in learning more.
Okay,
Instagram's the place to go.
Awesome. And so this is your full-time gig. Both the two of you are doing this full-time now.
Yeah. Yes, we quit serving a long time ago.
A long time ago. It's only been like what?
Well, it feels like a long time ago, but
a little bit over a year now.
Yeah, I mean, after that initial house, and we were bringing in $5,000 a month from that. It was shortly after that where we decided, okay, we can't be. Let's go into this full time, and yeah.
You had a light bulb moment that, hey, this is too good to not do more of.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any big stressors that, like, things that keep you up at night doing all this?
Not really. I mean, I try not to involve myself in the operations just because I feel that the more I'm kind of entrenched in the day-to-day, the more stressed I get. So I try to not really think too much about what's going on.
No? Well, who does? Your person on the ground, whoever's on the ground in those cities.
Yeah. Or me.
Or her.
No, but it's nothing really that keeps us up. I mean, it's always just about how we can grow bigger and how we can really start scaling. And for us, we kind of want to take this global as well. So we want to take it down to the States, and, it would be really cool to have properties like in Europe and all of that. So that's definitely something we're looking into. And that's, I would say that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Where to go next?
Where to go next?
So you'd be good to do this in the States. Do you have any specific markets you're thinking about?
We're actually looking to go down to Florida this June to scope out some markets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Honestly, I don't know. Like,
we're not really States, familiar. Actually. Like, yeah.
So I'm looking to drive down and just look at a whole bunch of different cities and see like what would make sense. But I think we can replicate this pretty much anywhere as long as the state and the city laws allow it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The thing with Florida is it's kind of the inverse of home in terms of the months that are good. Like the summer is not ideal for Airbnb down here because it's all vacation driven, right? No one really wants to be in Florida in the summer. So, I mean, the best months are like March and February, and then you've got November and December as being like kind of like secondary. And then July, I think, is pretty good. And other than that, it's kind of like the rest is kind of like shoulder season. It's odd. I'm still wrapping my head around it, but yeah, this has been on my radar too, which is why I'm prying with so many questions. But hopefully, all the viewers and listeners will appreciate, how to structure that, because what you're describing is more of a city approach to more of a plain. I'm not calling Ontario cities plain Jane, but some of them, like they're so diverse. In terms of industry, it's not like no one's going there for vacation. You're just getting people that are doing miscellaneous this and that are renting out your properties. Which is great. That's predictable. Is vacation the same in your mind?
No, it would be different for sure.
No, but you're still open to it. You're open to going the vacation route.
Yeah, because when it's hot, it's really hot. And it can look absolutely insane. And then on the off seasons, like it's going to dry up so much. Like you've got to be prepared for the upswings and the downswings.
Yeah, I've seen some, just looking at properties that are for sale down here. I've seen landlords that will actually they'll Airbnb for say 9 months out of the year, and then they'll have full month tenants for the other ones.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to have a strategy with it.
Yeah.
With Airbnb, I mean, we could go short-term rentals for the hot season,
and just pivot the strategy.
Pivot the strategy and start doing more like monthly bookings when it's so hot.
But you'd still do all of that through Airbnb or VRBO.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like even the monthlies, you just set it to longer terms.
We just don't
Yeah.
like.
Depending, don't say that.
I
But
mean,
depending on the the landlord tenant laws, I think that really depends, because we don't want to get someone in for a month who's like, well, I've been here for a month, so I automatically fall under the landlord tenant law. It might be really difficult to get them out at that point.
That just happened to my mother-in-law. Somebody rented out one of her Airbnbs for a month. She was doing kind of monthly during the lockdown, and said, okay, well, like, I need you to go now. I'm going to actually sell this place. And he's like, no, I'm a long-term tenant. I'm not leaving.
Wow.
Jeez.
And he also stopped paying rent.
Well,
Insult to injury. Oh man.
But would she not be able to go to like from like a legal perspective and say, hey, listen, like, because you're impeding on my Airbnb business, like, you can stay and I'll go through the LTB process, but I'm going to sue you for all the lost revenue kind of thing.
Yeah, not legal advice to anybody, but I personally would file a claim against that guy.
Exactly.
I would immediately file a claim for damages and you know, basically whatever I could do, right? I haven't seen the contract, but regardless of LTB, you know, that's a separate consideration. But yeah, definitely fight for damages right away.
Yeah.
You know, especially if it's a hot market and you want to sell now. Sure, the LTB might protect them, but it doesn't mean that you can't. Like, if the market changes down the road and she's out, that guy should have to pay for the difference,
100%.
the damages, right?
Yeah, hopefully that scares them off enough to just leave, right?
Yeah, I feel like so much of this is posture. Like, there's so many ways to just talk things out with people and reason with them. Look, I understand where you're coming from here, but here's how I will have to react. And then when I do that, it's not going to be good for either of us. So why don't we just settle this now? You know what I mean? Like, I think there's a way. There is always a way. So hopefully it works out for her. I haven't really dove into the details, but I hate to hear stories like that, right?
That sucks.
Anyways, okay. Well, it was really nice talking to you both and getting to meet finally. And I'll definitely look forward to hearing updates as to what you do next. And I will probably have many more questions to ask you.
Likewise.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Please make sure to share this episode far and wide. Help it help more people. I really appreciate you tuning in. Thanks. I'll see you on the next one.